Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to this session in which we'll be discussing all the acts of British India, a very critical topic out of the past 10 years of previous year questions. You can see that every year, or at least every alternative year, we've seen a question out of this area. Be it 1935, be it 1919, be it 1909, or be it an indirect question. There was a controversy over 1935 Act also. Therefore, this is your one-stop solution. This is your one-stop video in which I will cover everything systematically. Now, let's try to understand what is the task in hand. Good evening to all of you. And I want this to be a two-way interaction because there can be questions which may start to arise because of the technical jargons which are used. And there are also aspects which may not make sense in the first go. So please feel free to ask me to repeat and we can discuss everything in the best way possible. In the next 2.5 hours or 3 hours, we'll cover these 14 acts properly, and the idea is not just to make you ratify the concepts, it is to make you understand them. And I will give you certain tricks, codes, which you can use to remember the major provisions. Now, the task in hand is, in a way, if I divide it as a line of 1857, which is company and crown rule period, I have 1773, 1784, 1781 Amending Act. Then I have a whole plethora of charter acts which I have to cover, which is 93, 1813, 1833, 1853. Thereafter, I have one act which is a transition, 1858. Then the most important set, which is 1861, 1892, 1909, 1919, 1935, and 1947, which is Indian Independence Act. Don't worry about that, mate. Everything I will explain, I will give you flowcharts. Everything is written in the PPT also. We will revise through it. So in this session itself, I will teach you, I will make you learn, and we will revise also so that you don't have to watch this video again or in one go you understand everything. So don't worry about that. The idea is very simple. We have one set here. We have one set here. There further can be you can say they can be further divided. Regulating, amending, Pitts India. All of them are called charter acts. This is Government of India Act. Then you have Indian Council, Indian Council, Indian Council, Government of India, Indian Independence Act. So if you look at it, we can further subcategorize these acts. But if you look at the questions, we have seen a question out of 1833, direct question, Government of Governor General of India aspect. We've seen a question out of 1935. We've seen question out of 1919 three times. Further, we've seen a question out of 1909 separate electorates. We've seen a question out of the Regulating Act. So this area is important. This area is important. And therefore, I first want to establish one thing. This session is going to be critical for prelims B26, B27, B28. Whatever you are preparing, you have to go through it. I am looking at the chats also. So it is a two-way interaction. So don't have to worry. We will keep on interacting. If needed, I will take questions from time to time once the act is over. So let's start our discussion. Are we ready for that? Everyone, 14 acts, interesting constitutional history, helps you in polity also, helps you in history also, because our constitution is nothing but based on the Government of India Act 1930. Yes, sir. Very good. Okay. So let's start our analysis with the first act, which is Regulating Act. Now, we will divide our discussion into three parts. First is context. First is context. Why did the act come through? That is where some form of concept will come to you. Second is going to be provisions, meaning what were the provisions of the Regulating Act. And then I will give you code or trick to learn so that you can consolidate everything here. The problem mostly with acts is you tend to mix them up. There's a very good chance that you mix up Regulating Act with Pitts India Act, you mix up 1813 with 1848. This is where the problem is, that you can mix up the provisions. So you need a trick in order to understand. Now, let's try to understand the context of 1773. 1757, you have the Battle of Plassey. The British are able to get a foot in the door. However, 1764-65 is the real battle for India in that regard, which is Battle of Buxar. And through the Battle of Buxar, the British are able to get through the Treaty of Allahabad the Diwani rights. Now we know that the Diwani rights make the East India Company a private entity into a Diwan of the Bengali politics. Now, if you look at the Bengali politics, or if you look at the what we call as Bengali structure, it's a Mughal structure wherein you have the Nawab, and under the Nawab you have two positions. One is called Diwan and the other one is called Nazim, not Nizam, Nazim. What is called as Nizamat rules, Nizamat functions, and Diwan function. British get access to this, which is revenue administration, whilst this is part of larger what is called as Clivian hands-off policy. Clivian hands-off policy in turn leads to the idea that we don't want the Nazim's function. Let that headache be with the Bengali administration. Let's do one thing. Let us become the Diwan and collect revenue. This is where between 1765 to 1772, before Hastings is going to come to India, what is going to happen is Clive is going to destroy the whole countryside itself through his policy of just changing the supervisor, or through the policy of just changing the top of the Diwani administration, having European supervisors over the Amin and Amil. There will be two major consequences. Two major consequences. The first consequence is going to be what is called as the famines. The famines of 1769 and 70. More than that, East India Company will also go into a crisis, which is called the Clivian fiscal bubble. Clivian fiscal bubble is that he is going to argue that a lot of revenue is going to come from Bengal. He will estimate the revenue 5 times higher than what it was, and that will in turn lead to the East India Company stock price to rise. When the stock price is going to rise, what will happen is that their dividend angle is going to be very important. But when the famines will hit, when the revenue will be collected, it will be exponentially lower than what it should be. And that will in turn lead to the East India Company stock being sold in number. And that will in turn lead to the East India Company stock price to come very low, to come down. That is the bursting of the bubble itself. This will lead to a very interesting position. The interesting position of the East India Company is going to be at the same point of time when it is extracting crores of dam, which is copper coins, crores of dam from Bihar, Bengal, and Orissa. It will be applying for bankruptcy in the, you can say, British Parliament, and saying that we are in a crisis. This is where the British Parliament starts to realize that we need to regulate the, the East India Company, because they are not able to manage the territorial functions, the Diwani functions, along with their commercial functions. And four major issues were there. Too much corruption. Everybody was taking bribes left, right, and center. Gifts were being given to the what we call as uh, East India Company officers. Further, there is too much private trading. Rather than trading through East India Company, Clive himself was trading as an individual. Third is a lot of privileges were taken by Clive in the first and the second loot of Bengal. And in turn, all of this was leading to this whole system to go rotten in that regard. This is where you have to understand why is it called regulating act. It is the process of regulating the East India Company. This is the point from where East India Company's power is going to start to reduce. British parliamentary control over the East India Company is going to increase. And based on this understanding, the following structure was brought into context. Now, in order to understand that, you have to understand What is the structure pre 1773? Meaning, before the British Parliament brought in the Regulating Act, what is the structure? The structure is very straightforward. You have the Court of Directors, called the COD, and the Court of Directors is nominated by the shareholders of the East India Company. They are the ones who take decisions for the East India Company as a private entity, as a joint stock company. Under the Court of Directors, there were three major power centers, therefore, three major governors. One is called the Governor of Bengal, the other one is the Governor of Madras, and the other one is Governor of Bombay. Bombay being the headquarters in one side, Madras on the other side, Bengal because Clive had been sent as the governor of Bengal. Clive was the first governor of Bengal. Now, in this structure, you have to understand one thing, that all three are equal in the sense that their power is equal. They deal with the Court of Directors separately, and Clive cannot dictate anything to the governor of Madras. Clive cannot dictate anything to the governor of Bombay. All three have equal status in that. Now, when the 1773 Regulating Act comes through, things change. Things change. And this is where a new structure is brought in. And the first thing which is going to happen is, and I'll give you a more, you can say, mind map based understanding, then we'll read the provisions, because reading the provisions is not something which you can't do, but having a mind map in your understanding helps for better retention. That is what we are going to do. So what did the Regulating Act do? The Regulating Act now created a very interesting structure. The Court of Directors, they remain. Nothing changes at the level of the Court of Directors. But now, Governor of Bengal is going to be designated as Governor General of Bengal. This is a very interesting understanding that he has been given a status of being a Governor General, wherein there is a subordination of the governors of Madras and Bombay, wherein Governor of Madras and Governor of Bombay are now going to be subordinated to the Governor General of Bengal. This is important because this process of subordination is called as the concept of legislative centralization. This can come in the mains examination. What is the process of legislative centralization? The process of legislative centralization is when the Governor General of Bengal becomes a superior to Governor of Madras and Bombay, and from this point forward, there will be progressive control over these two governors. In order to take decisions and take administrative decisions, a four-member council, a four-member council is given to the Governor General of Bengal, which is called as Governor General Bengal in Council. That is the concept. Governor General of Bengal in Council, which is four members to help him execute his functions. And at the same point of time, the Act will say that a Supreme Court should be established in Calcutta with one Chief Justice and three judges. This will be done in 1774. And now a parallel authority is also created in the form of the Chief Justice of, or what is called Chief Justice of Calcutta, not India, but Chief Justice of Calcutta, which is the Chief Justice plus three judges which are going to be there. So if you look at the provisions, these are the four major provisions, which is legislative centralization, Governor General of Bengal, Supreme Court, and the judges. Now, let's read it and then come back and try to learn them. So, the provisions of the 1773 Act are as follows. Governor of Bengal became Governor General of Bengal. Warren Hastings is going to become the first Governor General of Bengal. Executive Council of 4 members are going to be given. Bombay and Madras are going to be subordinated to the Governor General of Bengal. Supreme Court was established with one Chief Justice and 3 judges. The servants of the East India Company will be not allowed to do private trading. This is a very important point. That if you are serving the East India Company, you can't trade as an individual. And more than that, for the first time, the British Parliament will in turn look at the revenue of India, how it is generated, and the court of directors have to now tell the British Parliament this is the revenue which was generated. So this is the process of progressive control of the British Parliament, that now you report to us what is the revenue which is getting generated. Now, look at this structure and you will realize that this is basically the main 4 provisions. Court of Directors still exist. Governor General of Bengal, 4-member council, Governor of Madras, Governor of Bombay have been subordinated. Thereafter, one Chief Justice, 3 judges, Supreme Court. Anybody has any issue in this? In understanding what are the major changes from a structure like this, where there are governors in a way connected to one another. Now there is a change. Now there's a change wherein the equal status is. Now the question is how to learn these provisions. Before we go to amending act, how to learn these provisions. Now therein lies a very simple method. The simple method is you use the code. Now you see this 73 GGB plus 4 LCSC. 73 GGB plus 4 LCSC. What does this mean? Act of 1773, Governor General of Bengal plus 4-member council, legislative centralization, which is this, and Supreme Court established. Remember this point, don't add micro provisions into this code. Because if you'll add micro provisions to the code, it is going to become very difficult to manage it in the larger scheme of things. Major provisions can be summarized in the form of 73 GGB plus 4. So this can be your way of active revision. Your active revision can only happen through this understanding that you're very quickly revising this. So again repeating 73 GG plus 4 SCLC means that there is a change. Governor General of Bengal plus 4-member council, legislative centralization, Supreme Court 1 plus 3 formula. So nothing out of the box has been done till this point. It is just that how do you manage this understanding? How do you manage this understanding? The more complex understanding you will create, the more complex it will become. So please understand this point. Don't add very minor provisions. Now, can I move to the next? Are we all clear about regulating act? Are we clear about regulating act? Trick is nice. Very good. Perfect. If it is making sense, nothing better. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's move to amending act of 1781. Now, if you look at it, there are 2 power centers which have got created. One is the Governor General in council, and there is one Supreme Court. There's one Supreme Court Chief Justice. Now, by the 1773 Act, in the next 5 to 6 years, 2, 3 major issues emerge. The first one being that were the Governor General and his council, which is PGB plus 4, answerable to the judiciary in the form of the Chief Justice. Further, are the company officers Are they answerable to the Chief Justice or are they answerable to the Governor General in Council? This is where a dual control structure has been created, where there was a gap in the 1773 Act, and that in turn led to the Chief Justice fighting with the Governor General in Council over the issue of company officers, their answerability, their executive answerability to the authority of the of the Chief Justice also and to the Governor General. Now the British Parliament will realize this mistake. They will realize it that this is creating more and more confusion. So the Amending Act was brought in to change this concept. Under the Amending Act, three things were made very clear. Company officers were answerable to the Governor General and his council, not to the Chief Justice. Not to the Chief Justice. This is where judicial control over an executive officer has been removed, which would have already been the case from the first point itself, but wasn't. So GGB plus 4, they are answerable to the Governor General in Council. Further, it was stated that the CG, which is Chief Justice, and his three judges, which is the Supreme Court of Calcutta, only has jurisdiction over the inhabitants or the people of Calcutta, and it should be practicing Hindu law, Muslim law, or English jurisprudence. Meaning, stop giving orders to the Chief Justice and also the company officers. At the same point of time, revenue matters. Wherever there will be a dispute over revenue matters, that was also removed from the Supreme Court and given to the Governor General in Council. This will lead to what is called as the district collector also becoming a judicial officer, what are called as mal adalats. They're called mal adalats, wherein the district collector sits and takes decision over revenue matters. It was very clearly said that the Supreme Court's jurisdiction over revenue matters does not lie. It is over civil matters, it is over criminal matters, not over revenue matters. At the same point of time, very interestingly, if there is any appeal from the provincial courts, it will not go to the Supreme Court, it will go to the Governor General of Bengal. Which means that if there is any form of, you can say, appellate jurisdiction, it is given to the Governor General of Bombay and not to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court was said only Calcutta, and your responsibility is managing the personal law and the English jurisprudence at this. So you can understand how powerful the Governor General of Bengal would have become. The Governor General of Bengal was now removed from this dualistic role, and the Supreme Court's executive jurisdiction over the East India Company was removed. And at the same point of time, now it was defined that it only has to do personal law defense, and the servants of the East India Company were immune to their duties vis-a-vis what they do as an executive, meaning they have immunity. Now, revenue matter being equally interesting because this is also distortion of separation of power. What does separation of power say? Judicial, executive, and legislative responsibility should be different. But an executive officer also has a judicial responsibility when it comes to revenue matters. At the same point of time, the original confusion was removed, but the, can say, the model which has been created gives Governor General of Bengal too much power. There's one more small amendment which will happen in 1786. When Cornwallis will be coming to India, he will say, I want to be commander in chief also. I want to be commander in chief also. And he will be given that responsibility because that was his most important, you can say, provision or condition to come to India. So please understand this point. The problem created by 1773 was managed in 1781, which is dualistic responsibility. All power vested in the into the Governor General of Bengal. Supreme Court only has control over personal law and English jurisprudence, which is English law being followed. Anybody has any issue in understanding 1781, 86? 86 is just commander in chief responsibility given to Cornwallis. Any major issue? Any word, jargon not making sense? Please tell me right now. Okay, perfect. Now comes our second major act, commander in chief of the army and the navy. In the commander in chief is of all the services. Now, 1773 marked a control over the East India Company. The second major act is Pitt's India. And Pitt's India Act has a very interesting context, wherein when Pitt the Younger is going to become the prime minister in, he somehow had a certain problem with the way East India Company was operating. His father also had, Pitt the Elder. Pitt the Younger, at the same point of time, also had a certain hatred for the East India Company, how it used to act, and was also waging war independent of how things were happening in Britain. So there is British parliamentary democracy, but that is being in a way defied by the East India Company, how it is done. So Pitt has problems in himself. This is something which he had developed over a period of time, where he did not like the way the court of directors had too much power. And this is where 1784 is also the period in which, so the context becomes the prime minister Pitt, and at the same point of time, East India Company's operations in India had now produced multiple famines and a proper crisis in the East India Company previously. And over and above that, the court of directors have a lot of power. This is what Pitt the Younger wanted to undercut. That is why the main provision, again, I'm giving you a flow chart here. The main provision of Pitt's India Act is the creation of a body. It is called the Board of Control. And this is where the dualistic control over India is going to start. Court of directors are going to be there, and board of control is going to be there. Now, board of control will have all the functions other than commercial functions, meaning revenue, administrative, military, political, all functions is with the board of control. The court of directors only for or have the commercial function. The real body now is the board of control. Both of them have control over their representative in India, which is the Governor General of Bengal. And then further, the subordination is there, Governor of Bombay and Governor of Madras. This does not change. But what is interesting is there will be one small change which will be brought in, which is there will be a reduction in the number of members in his council. There will be a reduction by one. It was GGB plus 4, it will become GGB plus 3. And this is very interesting. Why the reduction? Reduction because previously it became 5 members. The Governor General and 4 other members. So any 3 members can outvote the Governor General and his supporting member. So therefore, this number 5 is not suitable if the Governor General of Bengal wants to dominate the council. So what they did was they made it 3. So therefore, there are now 4 members. So either the Governor General has a standoff, which is equal votes against a decision, or he wins the decision itself. So the Governor General of Bengal had a lot of power. The power was exponentially higher than anyone else in the council. But numerically, GGB plus 4 was creating a numerical disadvantage to the Governor General of Bengal. It became Governor General of Bengal plus 3. Now you would say, sir, why is this board of control so important? What is so special about the board of control? The board of control represents something. It represents, for the first time, British Parliament, British Parliament, British Parliament now having indirect control over East India Company. You will say how? Because if you look at the composition of the board of control, at the composition, you will realize that it has a lot of the members from the Crown, Privy Council, and the British Parliament itself, which is you have the Chancellor of Exchequer. Further, you have 4 members out of the Privy Council of the Crown. And further, there is one Secretary of State, which is basically a cabinet member of the Parliament itself. So, if you look at the composition itself, the Court of Directors is commercial, Board of Control is political, dual government is now being created at the English level, and having the Chancellor of Exchequer, a Secretary of State, and 4 members of the Privy Council as appointed by the Crown means that two things became very clear. Now, in the Act, East India Company territories are called British possessions in India. So the Crown's power over these possessions, over the Maratha territory taken, over the Mysorean territory taken, over the Carnatic sector, over Bengal is now being pushed. So British sovereignty is now being asserted over what is the existing structure in that region. Now, how do you remember this? How do you remember this? The code is extremely simple, which is 84 BOC POD GGB plus 3. This is the code. We had 73 GGB plus 4 LCSC. Now we have 84 Board of Control, Court of Director, and 1 reduced member. 3 major provisions. The fact that it has said possessions in India is a subsidiary point. Do understand this point? Have to create a gradation of understanding. If you can learn these 2 codes, you are already in the right zone. You will automatically be able to answer any question because you know the major provisions. Subsidiary points and subsidiary provisions can be learnt, not a very big issue. But if you cannot differentiate between 73 and 84, then you're already in the wrong zone. And if you can't remember the date, it is very easy. 73 plus 1 plus 1, 84. 7 plus 1, 8. 3 plus 1, 4. So 73, 84. GGB plus 4, GGB plus 3. And thereafter, SCLC becomes BOC and COD. These 2 acts are as it is not very confusing. Along with 1781, it is not confusing. It is the Charter Acts will become problematic. So now the 3 independent acts are done. First, regulating. Second, amending. Third, Pitt's India. Anybody has any issue in this? Come on. This is making sense. The codes are helpful. I hope that you are learning in this class itself. I don't want you to go through it again so as to create a new learning. You have to learn it here itself so that you are done with this topic once this session is over. All clear? Perfect. Now comes Charter Acts, but I have to give you a little bit of context of what is this concept of charter. See, as you know, or you may not know, or you may have an understanding, East India Company is not a public entity. It is not created by the government of Britain. It is a private entity, joint stock company. Meaning, People have come together to create the original seed capital. They get a share of that company, joint stock company. Now, as a joint stock company, the lure of the people is dividend. And the shareholders want dividend, but not everybody can take a decision. So the court of directors was created. Now that has already got complicated because the board of control stands and the commercial functions of the East India Company was as it is reducing. At the same point of time, the political functions were increasing. But now the interesting aspect is when the East India Company was created in 1599 and 1600, that December and January, they had a problem. If East India Company is a private entity, it can have private competition from actors from within Britain itself. So the problem is that they have to make sure that there is no intra state or intra competition within Britain so that they can fight with the Portuguese and the Dutch in India itself or the East Indies in this. This is where the royal charter was given to the charter did not talk about a monopoly, but it said a very interesting line. The idea was that east of Cape of Good Hope is the East Indies. The East India Company had the exclusive right to trade from the British perspective or from the Crown's perspective, meaning it was the sole representative of the British Crown in the East Indies. Therefore, no other private company actor could enter the Indian Ocean and trade with the British flag. If you have a ship in that sector, you need to have the Union Jack, but also need to have the East India Company flag. If you don't have the East India Company flag, then you are a private trader who's trading in waters which have been given to the East India Company exclusively as the representative of the British Crown. Over that concept, the possession aspect comes to that all company possessions are nothing but British possession. Therein, this aspect of charter was critical for the East India Company to establish itself in India, and the Charter Acts are changes within the charter itself. Initial given for 9 years, then given indefinitely. James II is going to make it for indefinite period, but initially only given by Elizabeth for 9 years. 1609 it will be then made indefinite. From 1609 till 1793, no amendment was made into the charter. But now comes the context of the Charter Act of 1793. Charter Act of 1793 represents, or the Charter Acts 93, 13, 33, 53. Every 20 years, these Charter Acts represent the greed of the British Parliament. This is a very important point you have to understand. It represents the greed of the British Parliament for a very simple reason, because the British now started to realize, the British Parliament, the Crown started to realize that the trade in India is very lucrative. The commercialization of India is lucrative. The process of the capital coming to India is very, very lucrative. Therefore, we should tap into it. We should also have a piece in the cake, which is called as India per se. So what you have to understand is that there is a change in the orientation, in the way British Parliament was looking at the what we call as British possessions in that regard. So the story between 1773 till 1858, the story of progressive control of the British, which is nothing but the British Crown, wherein France is going to then start to fight its neighbors Austria and Prussia. But at the same point of time, Britain is also going to get involved because France had a general antagonism towards the English. The French have that initially. So in Europe, there is a war. For war, you need funding. And this funding is going to now come from the provisions which were introduced in the 1793 Act. With regards to the structure, Court of Director, Board of Control, Governor General of Bengal, Governor General of Madras, Governor General of Bombay, this structure is not touched. This concept remains. They don't touch the structure, but they bring in new concepts which tweaks the structure, which is they will now very subtly introduce very interesting provision in this understanding. What do I mean by that? For example, it will say that any appointed member of the administration in India needs royal approval before they leave India or get appointed. Meaning, when the board of control is appointing any member in India itself, there needs to be royal assent, which which in turn leads to this question: was East India Company actually a independent commercial entity by this point of time? And the answer to that question is no, because British parliamentary control and the crown's control had increased exponentially between 1773 to 93. In this period of 20 years, things had changed progressively and had become very different. Now, what is even more interesting is the war needs money. And that is where a very interesting provision is. 5 lakh pounds, not rupees, but pounds. 5 lakh pounds will be transferred from the East India Company to the British Parliament as a receipt, revenue receipt, once East India Company has paid out all its expenses. This is a one time transfer year on year, which will happen after dividends have been paid out, salaries have been paid out, pensions have been paid out, everything. But now the British Parliament wants a piece in the cake. 5 lakh pounds is now going to be transferred. This is directly taking revenue out of India and putting it into the British pocket. There is no other way of saying this. This is direct loot by the British Parliament via the East India Company. Annual, year on year. Annually, 5 lakh pounds has to be transferred. Now, during this period which we're talking about, French Revolution, 1793, there's one more project which the British are involved in. And that project is China. China has a problem with the world generally, which is that it will not open up its borders and its ports, all of its ports, to everyone. This is called the closed door policy of the Chinese. You come to one port only, Canton, Guangzhou, and you can only trade at Canton. If you're trading at any other space, you will not be allowed to enter into that understanding or into that port itself. The British were desperate. Why were they desperate? Because they were bleeding gold and silver. They wanted tea, they wanted silk, they wanted an alternative. And that alternative is going to be opium. It's going to be opium. They are going to literally drug the Chinese. But the problem was that the British East India Company can't take the opium in their own ships, because then it will in turn link the opium with the British directly. So, what they wanted was Patna opium should be picked up by Indian traders who are commissioned by the British, taken till the point of the Yellow Sea, and from there it used to be given to smugglers, and then the money was transferred to the British. Why am I having this conversation? Because there was a provision in the 1793 Act. The 1793 Act allowed for licenses to be given to individuals, which the East India Company could give to private traders. This is called country trading. This is the direct consequence of the opium trade in this. East India Company puts out a contract. We have 50 Indian traders. They will take opium, they will take it till China. From China, they will then give give it to the smugglers. Smugglers will give gold and silver. The payment of this will be given to them in India. Gold and silver is given to the British. So every provision of every act has a context. That is the whole point. If you don't understand the context, the whole provisions will start to make no sense whatsoever. It's random for you then. So this provision, license to be given to individuals, is for country trading. One more very interesting thing will be done, which is all adalats will be established, will be abolished. They will say that the need for a district collector to have his own court over civil matters or specifically revenue matters is not needed. They said, let us create a separate court. They will create what is called a Sadar Diwani Adalat, where this issue will go. That is judiciary. That's a separate issue altogether. But what is even interesting is that within this structure, now Governor General of Bengal can direct the Governor General of Bombay and Madras to do things, which is called as executive control. Called as executive control. You know, all of these provisions I will read out also, but I'm trying to give you an understanding first. First, bird's eye view, then into the details. Executive control over Bombay and Madras of the Governor of Bengal will be increased. Therefore, legislative centralization was further increased. At the same point of time, board of control composition will also be changed. Rather than having privy council members, it will say one president with two members could be or could not be privy council. Because now the British had more and more control, so they did not need to have the crown also involved. And a very important provision will also be used. That is the last major point, is the salary of the court of director members and the board of control members will be paid out of Indian revenue. This is called as what is called as home charges. First, you give 5 lakh. Then you also give the salaries of the board of control and the court of directors out of the Indian revenue. Further, at the same point of time, there is more executive control, and at the same point of time, the governor general could also override his three members. Could override his three members. So the overriding power has been increased. Execute. See, right? The idea is executive control. There was subordination in 1773. Executive control is given in 1793 formally. There's a difference. There is a subordination which is created in 1773. 1784, the 1793, there's a formal executive control which is given to the Governor General. So if you look at the provisions, this one is a messy one. This is the only act which has messy provisions. First, now charter acts will be renewed every 20 years. Second, royal approval over appointment of Governor General, Governor and Commander in Chief. Company would pay 5 lakh pounds annually to the British government. Senior officials, if they leave India without permission, means resignation. Company was empowered to give licenses to individuals as well as company employees to trade in India. This is where the country trade aspect comes through. The revenue administration was separated from judicial functions. Therefore, mal adalats were abolished. Further, the composition of these are minor points. Minor points, these are major points. Composition of board of control changed. President plus 2 members. And formal executive control of GGB over Governor of Madras and Bombay. At the same point of time, there is overriding power given to Governor General of Bengal over his council also. So you can see that the power is exponentially increasing. It is exponentially increasing and becoming more and more crystallized. But the point is how to remember all of this. How to remember all of this. The code is little bit messy, but the only one which is messy. 93, I'll write it in big font. 93, 5 lakh pounds, pound symbol, 5 lakh pounds, royal approval, mal adalat gone, at the same point of time, country trading. 84 GGB plus 3 BOC BOD, 73 GGB plus 4 LCSC. So I have four major provisions. 1793 Charter Act, 5 lakh pounds transferred annually, royal approval for appointment, mal adalats abolished, country trading being done. As I said in the beginning, don't add minor points in the code. It will become too messy to manage and therefore it will become too hard to control the code itself. Are we clear about this? Everyone, only messy provision. This one is a little bit messy because the provisions are itself quite messy. Yes? Yes, sir. Very good, sir. Okay. Now, we move to the Charter Act of 1813. With everyone's consent, we move to Charter Act of 1813. But now the Charter Act of 1813 has a very interesting context to it. Now pay attention because one of the most important, you can say, acts which will forever change how British operated in India is the Charter Act 1813 and 33. Two very important ones. Now, context have to understand. First context is rise of Napoleon 1799 1815. And what Napoleon had done at this point of time, Napoleon Bonaparte, is called continental blockade. Continental blockade is wherein the British are not allowed to trade with continental Europe. France has blocked that, and therefore European traders cannot cross the English Channel freely. This is problematic in the context that East India Company is trading in the background with India, whilst all other traders are, in a way, struggling with, with this continental bloc. At the same point of time, a now introduced person had now introduced new types of understanding with regards to economic theory. His name is Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. Adam Smithian notions of trade and monopoly based understanding was also now coming through, where Adam Smith argued that monopolies or trade monopolies distort the market, which is mercantilism is inherently distorting the market. State based control over trade is not the right way to go forward. What it should be is called as free trade, called as laissez-faire, laissez-faire trade, which is which is that we should have free trade. That free trade notion now is mixing with these two concepts together. Monopolies are bad, therefore charters are bad. At the same point of time, continental blockade has created a lot of pressure over the British generally to open the Indian sector. And this is where four major changes will be brought in. So you should know continental blockade and Adam Smith because all of this is also mains oriented area. I hope you realize this that there can be a question on any of these acts in the examination from a mains perspective. Mains, modern comes in mains. And therefore, my very simple, straightforward request to you is going to be to understand the acts. Because if you're going to just ratify the provisions, not understand their context, then there will be an issue overall in understanding how to go forward in the larger scheme of things. And you will not be able to write good answers. You will not be able to articulate your understanding in the best way possible. So, what are the changes which Charter Act of 1813 brings? See, with regards to structure, Board of Control, Court of Director, Governor General of Bengal plus his council, Governor of Madras, and Governor of Bombay. Nothing changes in this context. Nothing really changes in this context. But now new concepts come. First thing, which is the most important provision, Indian monopoly gone. Meaning, East India Company is not the only one which can trade in Indian Ocean. But Chinese monopoly retained, which means that from Cape of Good Hope to Straits of Malacca, now any British trader can trade. But from Straits of Malacca till China, which is Yellow Sea, that whole sector, South China Sea, only East India Company can operate. So Indian monopoly is gone. Now, what is interesting is that now if I am a East India Company shareholder, would I be happy with this decision or sad with this decision with regards to the East India Company losing its monopoly over India and only retaining it over China? This would be a decision which will encourage me or discourage me. It will in turn lead to this unhappy situation, a situation where I really don't have now no real incentive to buy the East India Company stock. Then 1793 charter, there was a provision that if the East India Company wants, it can increase the dividend from 5% to 10%. That was not done in 93. But in order to make the East India Company stock still relevant and at the same point of time lucrative, what they did was that that they increased the dividend to 10.5%. To 10.5%. Provision was already there in 93, used in the 1813 Act, that dividend is going to be 10.5. So that people, doubling of the dividend, so that people still buy East India Company stock. Well, still buy East India Company stock. This is a very important point. Further 20 years for this provision, India and China, that will remain 20 years is the life. At the same point of time, there was a lot of pressure which was getting created in England that India is barbaric. India does not know how to treat their women. That whole socio religious reform angle, wherein we burn our women. Sati. Widow remarriage is not allowed. Children are being married at very young ages. Child widows are there who are being burnt in the fire of Sati. And the Christian missionaries were arguing that we should be allowed to enter into the Indian subcontinent, and we should be allowed that we need to enter into the Indian subcontinent with the permission of the East India Company, so that we can also preach and make this barbaric world better. Make this barbaric world better. And this is where an evangelical push was there in Britain that opened up India for the Christian missionaries from Britain. Previously, that was not allowed. Most of them used to come to Serampore. At Serampore, they used to, in that regard, come to that port, enter into the British territories, but they were not allowed via the East India Company charter. But Christian missionaries will now be allowed to enter and preach in India. This will increase the conversion activities. This will in turn allow Christian schools, Christian missions, Christian hospitals to develop. And this will in turn become a push for this understanding that we are the civilizing, you can say, force. We are the white man's burden understanding. At the same point of time, 1 lakh rupees was allocated for the education of the native. Now, you know this. This is the whole Anglican versus the Orientalist debate, where what to do with this 1 lakh rupees. This will not get allocated for the next 10 years, but it will be only Macaulay's minute, which is going to change everything forever. And the Anglicanists are going to win over the Orientalists. But 1 lakh rupees is a very big amount. And therefore, this money is going to in turn tip the British from being Orientalist towards Anglican. 1835, the money is going to be finally used. But what is even more interesting is board of control and court of directors, their accounts were separate. Their accounts were separated. Accounts were separated means that whatever board of control revenue expenditure is, it should be separated from court of directors. Meaning the administrative amount should be different from the commercial amount. It's a very interesting point that they started to create a division here also. And one more very interesting provision was there, which in turn tells you how the British Parliament had taken more or less full control over the legislature in India. It stated that any law which has been created by the Governor of Madras, the Governor of Bombay, or the Governor General of Bengal and his council, it should be sent to the Board of Control, and the Board of Control will send it to the British Parliament for assent. Only when the British Parliament accepts that act, then only it can become a law in any of these presidents. Very clear, very clear assertion of sovereignty of the parliament. Parliamentary sovereignty has been pushed. That you can make bills, you can make acts, but they become proper legislative documents only when the British Parliament is going to say yes. So, if you see, simple, straightforward point, right? That law making power initially was with the governors itself. They can make laws. The governor makes it. He signs on it. It becomes a law. Starts as a piece of legislation. Once he signs it, it becomes a law. Now they said no. If you want a law to become a law, you first send the proposed bill to the British Parliament. That will go through the channel of the Governor General and the Board of Control. British Parliament will table it in the Parliament session. They will see if, okay, this is making sense or not. If the British Parliament gives assent and thereafter passed by both houses and then goes to the Crown for assent, once the Crown gives assents, then further it will be sent back as a law. Meaning no law can be created without British parliamentary approval. This is pure control over law making power in India. This exactly is, see, the provision is very clear in how it defines power. Why were the accounts separated? Because they wanted to see what was the difference between the commercial revenue and the administrative and the revenue which is coming out of land revenue. Company monopoly in India ended, retains China monopoly. Shareholders will be given 10.5% dividend. Company to retain possessions for 20 years. Sum of 1 lakh rupee has been given for encouragement of science, literature, and learning. Same point of time, regulations made by Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta to be laid before British Parliament. Christian missionaries were permitted to come and preach in India. So it's a messy, it's a lot of provisions. What is our code here? Very simple. It is 13, India gone, 1 lakh for education, Christian missionaries, British parliamentary approval. You can write it like this also. 13 India BPA CM 1 lakh for education. 1 lakh for education. So this is very interesting because now it is becoming more and more explicit from the process of subordination, from the process of subordination to the process of what is called as executive control. Now all of the actors have been deprived of their law making power because now the British Parliament is directly involved. Now the British Parliament is directly involved. So I hope that this is clear. Get my point? Get my point? Till 1813, anybody has any issue? Come on, everyone. Tell me. The chat section. It's fine. Anybody has any issue in this provision, in this understanding? Till this point, we've discussed a lot of different acts. Anyone has any issue? BPA means British Parliamentary Approval. No, sir. Yes, sir. Clear. BPA means British Parliamentary Approval. Clear. No issues whatsoever. Very good. So, 1773, 1784, 1793, 1813. Two charter, one regulating, one pitch India. Got it? This is the now the most important and came in the 2024 paper, which is Charter Act of 1833. Charter Act of 1833. Now, Charter Act of 1833 is important. Context is mounting pressure, mounting pressure, and that pressure obviously is going to come from the free trade lobby. From the free trade lobby, that you have to bring in changes. And this lobby is becoming more and more stronger. So, free trade lobby is mounting pressure over Chinese monopoly. And this is a very important point that fundamental changes have to be brought in. And therefore, the provisions of the 1833 Act indicate that also. So let's talk about the provisions, bird's eye view. Board of control is still there. Court of directors are still there. But now there's a nomenclature change. The Governor General of Bengal will be named as Governor General of India, called as Governor General of India. And now, in principle, there will be three governors. Governor of Bengal. For a very long time, this office was there but was subsumed within the Governor General of Bengal, Pentic. But later it will be separated. Governor of Madras and Governor of Bombay. So you can see that there is major change in the nomenclature. Further, China monopoly gone. China monopoly gone. So therefore, the Chinese have now other British traders also coming through, other than East India Company. Other than East India Company. What is even more interesting is we see a peaking, or you can say highest point of legislative centralization. Why? Because under the provision of the 1833 charter, the governors of the provinces could only propose laws to the Governor General of India. And the Governor General of India and his council will then enact the law or draft it, send it for British parliamentary approval, and thereafter give the law back to the governors. It's a very interesting point that now they can't even enact a law. They can't draft a law also. You want a law, you tell us what is needed, and thereafter you tell us what we have to do further, what has to be done further. So legislative centralization has now reached to the highest point. To the highest point. So very simply, the provisions indicate all power getting concentrated. Yes, monopoly of tea gone. China's gone. All power is getting concentrated in the Governor General of India. Further, there is one more understanding, which is that Europeans could previously not enter the Indian subcontinent, buy land, and then expand colonialism independently. East India Company's approval was needed. But European immigration into India was now allowed and they could buy and possess land. This is important because tea plantations, coffee plantations in India will exponentially increase at this point of time. Exponential increase in the amount of tea and coffee investments by the Britishers and by the Europeans. Further, slavery should be abolished, only abolished in 1843, but the provision was there in 1833 only. And one member was added here. Guess what member that person is going to be? Come on, tell me. If the Governor General has to make laws for the whole of India, and he has to, in a way, even make laws which were proposed by the governors, the new member is a law member. And this is where Macaulay is going to come into text, and the law commission will be established. So very interestingly, the changes are connected. The changes are connected. Canning. So therefore, Governor General of India is now having the Governor of Bengal, Madras, and Bombay fully subordinated, but everything happens in his name. Now let's consolidate this through the provisions itself. Governor General of Bengal becomes Governor General of India. Bentinck was the first Governor General of India, most powerful being Canning. Thereafter, Governor of Bombay, Bengal, and Madras were deprived of their legislative powers. Deprived of their legislative powers. East India Company, purely administrative body now, more or less. Further, company has more or less ended its commercial function. Is Bentinck being the first Governor General of India, Canning being the most powerful. Then it provided that the company's territories be held in the name of His Majesty. So now crown control is there. 20 years provision is there, obviously. Territory is to be governed in the name of the crown. Again, crown. Company's monopoly over China gone. A point which I have already discussed. All restrictions of Europeans' immigration and acquisition of property in India were lifted. Governor General was to superintend, control, direct all military affairs. The government of Madras and Bombay, including Bengal, could only propose laws to the Governor General. Law member was added, obviously, and this provision was to create an illusion of quality in India, because there was an attempt to introduce open competition in 1833, but open competition was not introduced in 1833. No Indian citizen was to be denied employment under the company on the basis of religion, color, descent. Only in name, it was a racial government as it is. Open competition not brought in, still nomination system in ICS. The administration was urged to abolish slavery, which will only happen in 1843. So now, what are the provisions? I hope that you realize that when you read the provision and when I make the mind map, it is a very different affair. It's a very different affair because reading the provision, it is very jargonized, bare act type language. You should be able to make this yourself and understand what the provisions are. So, China monopoly gone, law member added, legislative centralization at the highest point, European immigration allowed, slavery will be abolished in the next 10 years, and and the name of the crown and the governor of general of India is going to become most important. Painting being the first governor general. So, how do we remember this? Very simply, 33, China gone, legislative centralization highest point, governor general of India, and the concept of SLM, the the idea that law member has been added. Law member has been added. We can make this LM L. 33 China LC highest point GGI LM. And you can also write European immigration if you want to write. S, if you want to add S, you can. Yeah, yes. S is for slavery. So 33 China monopoly gone, LC highest point, GGI, S slavery, EI, LM. Make it the way you like it, but I hope you get the point. I hope you get the point. Anybody has any issue in Charter Act 1833? Come on. 1833. No issues? Okay. Control by crown means, see, everything was previously done in the name of the East India Company. Sir, tea monopoly also gone. Yes, yes. China monopoly gone, meaning tea monopoly. See, previously everything was done in the name of the East India Company. Then it became British possessions. Still East India Company name. Now it became very explicit that everything will happen in the name of the crown. It became an exclusive concept that you do what you want to do, but everything will be done in the name of the crown. So control by crown is more or less complete. East India Company is now just an administrative body, it's like an indirect body which is controlling India. So let's try to revise. Revise kar, right? Let's revise. Before rather let's do 1853 and then we'll revise. I'll give you a short, you can say 5-minute breather, and then we can again start our discussion. I hope this structure works. If you don't want a breather, you tell me, I'll not give you that also. Okay. Now 1833 Act, everybody is fine. We've done 1773, 84, 1793, 1813, 1833. Parliamentary approval was required since 1813. Yes, that provision we've already established. BPA, British parliamentary approval needed, that we already established. Right? Manjeet, I hope you understand that. This process has been already established to the 1813 charter, which is that you have to send the understanding to or the law to the parliament. Now, let's discuss 1853. 1853 charter has a very interesting concept. There was no provision of 20 years. No provision of 20 years. Meaning, whilst 1393, 33 said 20 years, there was no provision. Further, what we see is that this charter is coming in the context of a very messy system wherein laws have to be proposed, then have to be sent. It's a very complex system. So this charter is known for two very important changes, very major changes which will happen. Context is the complexity of lawmaking. So what is the interesting way in which things change? See, board of control, court of directors obviously will never change till this point. Then we will have Governor General of India. Governor General of India. General of India. Governor General of India, India, and he will have Governor of Bombay, Governor of Bengal, and Governor of Madras. At the same point of time, there is going to be now a major change in things. For example, Court of Directors, the composition, members were reduced. Members were reduced. Number you should not know, from 24 to 18. 6 members were now nominated by the Crown. First major change is this division. Executive Council, Legislative Council. Who is given authority to British Parliament to make these acts to India, sir? Because the East India Company is an entity which has taken power through the charter from the British Parliament and the Crown. The British Parliament has the power to dictate to the East India Company what they do in India, because they draw power through that concept. Isn't COD an ECI body? Why will BP change it? ECI, you mean what? Executive. The court of directors, too many members were there. Board of control already was controlled by the British Parliament. They wanted to now change the commercial functions also. So East India Company body, they are also playing with that concept. First major change is this, that now there are two councils under the Governor General, not one, which is Legislative Council, Executive Council. This makes laws, this execute laws. This executes laws. At the same point of time, one more very important change is going to be open competition. Open competition in ICS services. Something which was proposed in 33 will never come through, but it will take them 20 years more. Open competition means before this point, it you were nominated as an ICS officer to India. The board of control used to do it. So mostly nepotistic behavior was there. You used to send your nephew, your son as officers. But now there will be the examination which you want to clear, which is the concept of the Indian Civil Services examination will be created, which will be then be open to, in principle, to Indians, or to Indians also, but was right now dominated by the British. So let's make our code and then revise everything till this point. Take a break, come back. Now, one interesting line which is written in 1853 Act is, it says local representation. What most students do is they think of local representation as the concept of Indian representation in legislative council. Local representation here means Bombay, Madras, and Bengal can send members to the legislative council. That is what it means by local representation. That local governments can send members to the executive council. Also, in principle, the concept of lieutenant governor (LG) was also created through this act. So our code becomes 53: executive council, legislative council, and open competition, along with the concept of what is called as local representation. Local representation. Now, before we go to Government of India Act 9, or what is called as Act of Good Governance in India, or Good Government in India 1858, or Government of India Act 1858, let's do one thing. Let us consolidate till this point. Can we do that? Everybody's on the same page with me. No issues whatsoever. Everything is perfectly fine. Let's consolidate. Then I will leave you on that slide. You can further consolidate. We take a breather and we come back and discuss the next most important set, the most difficult also, which is also relevant for the examination. Yes, sir. Very good. Very good. Provisions, Legislative Council, Executive Council, open competition, Macaulay Commission of 1858, company rules extended and allowed to retain, but no provision given, local representation, which is the idea of what is called as Bombay, Bengal, and Madras sending members. Now, very beautiful. Very good. 1773, 1784, 1781, 17, we can add this, 1781, 1784, 1793, 17, 1813, 1833, 1853. यही किया अभी तक. This is what we've done till this point. Now, run the code in your mind and let's add the main feature. 1773, Governor General of Bengal, 4 members, and legislative centralization, Supreme Court with 1+3 combination. What is the GGB plus 4 LCSC 373? This is where Supreme Court jurisdiction removed, and we have the concept of GGI plus council is supreme. Thereafter, we run our code of 1784, which is GGB plus 3, Board of Control, Board of Directors. It's in the Act. Privy Council members are part of the Board of Control. Please remember this point. There's nothing called Board of Directors. In UPSC, if it says Board of Directors, it is a wrong statement. It has to be Board of Control. Then the messiest of all, 1793. 1793, we have 5 lakh pounds. 5 lakh pounds to be transferred. Further, what is the other provision? There has to be British parliamentary approval. Further approval in the, or we'll say royal approval, not British parliamentary approval. That is having a different connotation to what we know in that regard. Then mal adalats are abolished, and we know of country trading. Very good. So 93, 5 lakh pounds, royal approval, mal adalats gone, country trading, and we can say salary also given via Indian revenue. Very good. Then 1813, India monopoly gone, China still there. 1 lakh rupees for education. Christian missionaries have been allowed. Christian missionaries have been allowed. And British parliamentary approval for acts. 1833, Governor General of India and Bombay, Madras, Bengal can only propose laws. Further, European immigration is allowed into the Indian subcontinent, and everything will happen in the name of crown, and China monopoly also gone. Law member added. And 53 is what? executive council, legislative council, open competition, and local representation. I hope that the past 1.5 hours has been fruitful. Bravery is also gone here. Has been fruitful. And if you allow me, we'll take a 10-minute break, come back, and start the next set, which is the most important. I'll leave you on this slide as a way of consolidation. I hope codes are making sense. The understanding is making sense. Widow remarriage is not part of the act itself. And you are understanding the acts and their context. Because till this point, it is more mechanical. After this point, it is going to become more difficult because the provisions are more and more elaborate. Are more and more elaborate. Yes, perfectly fine. So let's come back at 7:50 and let's take the movie story forward. We come back at 7:50. Please consolidate till this point. Interesting? Very good. See you in the next 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back. I'm audible and visible to everyone? Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, sir. Was the position of Governor of Bengal Roshan for a certain amount of time? Yes, but it was a separate office as an additional charge. As an additional charge, it was. Okay, let's start again. Okay. Now, till this point, we have understood the Company Acts as they're called, which is 73, 81, 84, 93, 13, 33, 1853. Now, the context for this act is a gruesome one, which is revolt of 1857. Revolt of 1857. Revolt of 1857 was a reaction. It was a reaction to British colonialism generally, the political frustration, the economic exploitation, the way the social changes were bringing in some form of suspicion, the anxiety of is called as conversion, further annexation of Awadh, the military changes which is coming through, doctrine of lapse, subsidiary alliance, everything together created a certain explosive situation which will start in Barrackpur, then in Meerut, then in Delhi, will spread to Kanpur, from Kanpur to Lucknow, from Lucknow it will then further go eastward towards Jagdishpur. We will have further a lot of different sectors and theaters which will appear across India in that regard. But it was a restorative revolt, not per se based on notions of nationalism. But revolt of 1857 was a rude shock to the British. And it was, in a way, the last nail in the coffin for the East India Company. That the East India Company can't really manage India now. It is too difficult to do that. It's too difficult to do that. It's a moment of, you can say, clarity for them that there is mismanagement, that there's pure mismanagement. And now, with 10 to 15,000 Britishers and white men dead in India through a revolt where everybody wanted to take back power and give it to the original or the restorative powers, as they're called, there was a need for change. This act was accompanied by what is called as Victoria's Proclamation, or what is called as Queen's Proclamation, which said we will not annex, and the idea of paramountcy will come through, which is princely states which have not been annexed will be subordinated and integrated, which is called the movement away from subordinate isolation to subordinate union. Now, the context for all of this is very clear. Context is there was now a need for change, and this act marks the difference or the change from company rule to crown rule, where the crown is finally going to take over the provisions directly. And therein lies the changes which are made, sweeping changes which are made in Britain. What is the structure pre 1857? Pre 1857, the structure is you have the board of control, the court of directors, the governor general of India with his two councils, executive council, legislative council, and he will have three governors directly under him: governor of Madras, of Bengal, and of Bombay. These three are directly under him. This is the basic structure which is being. As soon as the act comes, 1858 act, this will change fundamentally via the concept of Secretary of State. Secretary of State. A cabinet minister who is answerable to the Prime Minister, therefore the British Parliament, and he will be given 15 members to assist him in the process of governing India, all paid out of Indian revenue only. And this body is going to be called as India House. Basically, Ministry of India, if you want to call it. It's a Ministry of India headed by a Secretary of State to India. So the dualistic control is now gone. He will now control India via the Governor General and Viceroy of India. Governor General and Viceroy of India. Governor General and Viceroy of India. Why is he called the Viceroy? Because he is the representative of the Crown. Because the British Parliament draws its power from the royalty, constitutional monarchy. So he is the Viceroy. Now remember, this is only one person, scanning one person. It is not two people. Governor General and Viceroy of India is his whole title now. He will have his executive council, he will have his legislative council, and the governors will remain governors as they are of Bombay, Bengal, and Madras. And these are the two major changes, which is viceroyalty and the concept of Secretary of State. One more thing, ICS officers are now not going to report to the Board of Control. No, they will report to the in a way to the Governor General, therefore the Secretary of State, therefore the British Parliament. Therefore, the British Parliament, in turn the Crown. In turn the Crown. That is why the ICS officers are now in a way part of royal service. So when we talk about the provisions, Crown empowered to appoint Governor General of India and governors of presidencies. Title of Viceroyalty is added to the Governor General of India. Authority will be through Secretary of State and 15-member council. Board of Control, Court of Directors is gone. Thereafter, new ministry created known as India House. Secretary of State will be member of the British Parliament. Indian Civil Services placed under Secretary of State. So, very simply, this act forever changes everything. We have a very simple system of SOS plus 15, DGI plus Viceroy, Executive Council, Legislative Council, Governor Bengal, Governor Bombay, Governor Madras. Anybody has any issue in understanding this? Anyone? Any issue in understanding this? No? No. Okay, perfect. Now, so we enter a new zone, the zone of Indian Council Acts. Indian by GGI plus Viceroy because he's called Governor General and Viceroy of India. Governor General as a position, Viceroy because he's the representative of the Crown. Indian Council Acts. Now we enter a new zone. The nomenclature changes for three acts: 61, 92, 1909. 1909. These are three acts which are called Indian Council Act. Now the question is, why are they called Indian Council Acts and what is the need for Indian Council? See, the context is very simple. The company system is complex. The governor first proposes a law. That goes to the Legislative Council. That goes to the Governor General of India and Viceroy. Then it goes to the Secretary of State. Then from the Secretary of State, it goes to the Prime Minister. From Prime Minister, it goes to the British Parliament. Then, same way, the law has to come back British Parliament, Prime Minister, DGI, Legislative Council, then to the governors itself. It's a very complex process of lawmaking. Very, very complex. And it is very clear that this process cannot sustain over a long period of time. So now the British Parliament wants to simplify with full control over India with Crown Rule inaugurated in 1858 itself. And further, they have to create an illusion of democratic values being propagated in India. This is called as the concept of what we today call as a certain understanding and certain understanding that they are doing what is called as white man's burden. White man's burden. So therefore, it is a complex system. It's a complex understanding. Therefore, so please understand that the context is of simplification, and the 1861 Act inaugurates legislative decentralization in the Indian subcontinent. The word legislative centralization between 1773 to 1853. From 1853 onwards, from 1858 onwards, there is progressive decentralization. So let's try to understand what is this process of legislative decentralization and what are the major provisions of this whole concept of what is today called as the Indian Council Act of 1861. Let's try to understand. Everybody's on the same page, no issues whatsoever, perfectly fine, very good. Now, let's try to understand the structure here. First, Secretary of State is there. He is there with 15 members. This does not change. This is called India House. Thereafter, there is Governor General and Viceroy of India. This is fine. He has two councils, Executive Council and Legislative Council. Legislative Council. Further, now there is an expansion in the number of provinces. You will have Governor of Bengal, of Bombay, of Madras. These three were always there. But now we have Punjab, Punjab, and Northwestern Province, which is basically, this is going behind me. Punjab and Northwestern Province, sometimes also called as Northwestern Frontier Province, but Northwestern Frontier Province became a proper province only in 1935. Sometimes it is referred to as Northwestern Province in certain books. Sometimes it will be referred to as Northwestern Frontier Province. It was under a division of having one governor, one LG, but the idea is both stand because there's no clarity from the British side here itself. So you have Madras, you have Bombay, you have Bengal, you have Punjab and Northwestern. Basically, Northwestern sector is divided into two provinces, which is Punjab and Afghanistan, Pakistan part is called Northwestern Province. Now, very important sweeping changes are brought in every area, which is, for example, the first thing which is introduced is the structure we discussed. So, the first major change is going to be Executive Council will have what is called as portfolio system. Called as portfolio system. What is portfolio system? Portfolio system is the concept of having the executive councillors having defined roles. Basically, how our ministers have certain portfolios. You have a defense minister, finance minister, home minister. Same way, their roles were defined. roles were defined through portfolio system. Now, in order to do an illusion, to create a drama that they were giving Indians power, this is what the crown wants to do. Yes, departments is a good understanding. Three Indians were for the first time nominated to the Viceroy's Legislative Council. Legislative Council. Three. Three members were added. One, all loyalists. All loyalists. One called named as Raja of Banaras. The other, the Maharaja of Patiala. Maharaja of Patiala. And Sir Dinkar Rao. All very close to the British. So now they say that, oh, see, we have associated Indians with the Legislative Council. Executive Council has portfolio system. At the same point of time, there will be a new major addition which is called as Provincial Legislative Councils. This is called the restoration. This is called the restoration. This is in 1897. This is in 1860. Rather 1897 and 18. Yeah. Using. Okay. This is called the process of restoration of law making power back to the provinces. Back to the provinces. Back to the provinces. Secretary of State, one major change portfolio system. Second major change, three members added to the Legislative Council. Third is the concept of Provincial Legislative Council. Provincial Legislative Council. There is one more set of changes which are brought in. Governor General of India got ordinance making powers under the emergency clauses. This is again very interesting. Emergency clauses were brought in, nominated by Viceroy. Yes, these three members are nominated by the Viceroy. All the process of nomination only. So if you look at this slide, you will realize it is a very interesting process of decentralization. Very interesting process. First, provincial legislative councils, the concept of the what is called as three members, portfolio system, and ordinance making powers along with emergency powers. Along with emergency powers. So if you look at the whole provision, it is written in much more complex words. If you go into the books, it will say that British Parliament wanted to introduce a process of reversal of legislative centralization by restoring power to the provincial governors. Indians were associated with lawmaking power. In 1862, Lord Canning nominated three Indians in his legislative council: Raja of Banaras, Maharaja of Patiala, Sir Dinkar Rao, point we've discussed. Restored legislative power to Bombay, Madras, and later Northwestern Frontier Province and Punjab. Portfolio system introduced by Canning, implemented through this act. Viceroy is having ordinance making powers. Any bill on debt, military, and public revenue and foreign affairs can only be introduced to the assent of the Governor General. Law making power is given back to the provincial governors. It was taken away. Emergency power is, for example, the legislative council is not in action, the executive council is not there also. So the governor general in his own right can create a law. So that is basically ordinance. The concept of ordinance comes from here only. Life having 6 months, similar to what we have today. So the concept of ordinance making power comes from here. So please understand, Secretary of State plus 15 members, Governor General of India and Viceroy Executive Council, Legislative Council, the concept of Governor of Bombay, Bengal, Madras, Punjab, Northwestern Frontier Province. And here we have PLC as a major change. Here we have portfolio system. Here we have three members in Indian context. And this whole system is now based on an idea that lawmaking power should be reduced or should be decentralized. The power of the Governor General and Viceroy is too much with regards to lawmaking. Anybody has any issue here? Anyone? Indian Council Act 1861. Anyone? No, sir. Yes, sir. Legislative decentralization. This is called as legislative decentralization. Legislative decentralization is this only. Clear? Okay. Now, let's move to Indian Council Act 1892. Now, see, understand one thing. Between 1861 and 92, things have changed quite a lot. 1861, 1892, in between in 1885, we have what was formed in 1885? What was formed in 1885? Come on, tell me. Yes, very good. The formation of the Indian National Congress. The INC will be formed in 1885. Now, when the INC will be formed in 1880, what will happen is that there is new sense of economic nationalism, which will set in. The idea that the British are going to do good in India will be now challenged. And economic nationalists such as Dadabhai Narauji had now fully changed the understanding. Now people were questioning. They understood drain of wealth, and the drain of wealth theory came through. So 1892 is a moment in which they had to do something. They had to do something, which is they had to create an illusion that they are doing something for Indians also. That is why, see, the structure remains the same. Structure remains the same. Governor General of India and Viceroy plus his executive council and legislative council remains intact. Now one more province is added. We have Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Punjab, Northwestern Frontier Province, and one more province is added, which is called Oudh, which is basically Awadh. Awadh. Each of them having their provincial legislative council. But what this act does is it expands these councils. Expansion. This is called as the Indian Legislative Council. This is also expanded, also called as the Central Legislative Council. These are two words which are used for it. So there are expansion. Seats are increased. But why to increase these seats? Because now there can be nomination by municipal boards, district boards, trade groups, chamber of commerce, of members into this PLC and into this PLC. Pure appeasement. What we call this as is indirect elections. Though the word election is not used in the act, it is a pure process of nomination, but it is believed that indirect elections is so the provisions of this act are very simple. The 1892 act will increase the non-official members, meaning Indian members. And it is believed that official majority was kept in Central Legislative Council. Provincial Legislative Council, non-official majority was coming through, which is non-Indian members or non-British members were more. So Bombay, Madras, Bengal, Northwestern Province, and Oudh, Oudh all will have increased members. This was to basically nominate people. Trade groups meaning guilds, trainees. If there is a certain group of goldsmiths, they can now nominate someone. So there is addition of more members to the governor's legislative council also. The Indian Legislative Council, as it is called. Local entities, universities, district boards, municipalities, zamindars, trade groups, chamber of commerce can nominate, recommend members to provincial councils. This is what is called as a new form of representation which comes through. And it did not explicitly use the word election, did not include there, it included an indirect electoral process of selecting some non-official members. So there is no election per se, it is nomination concept. It is nomination concept. Member of legislative councils were granted the right to discuss, express their opinions. Legislators were allowed to question the executives on public interest. 6 days notice was needed to do something like that. Official majority was maintained more or less everywhere. More or less everywhere. So franchisee is not there. There's no franchise here. It is pure concept of just giving, nominating somebody. For example, I ask all of you here to nominate a person who could represent you. That is not an election. That is internal nomination. So see, 1862 and 1861, 1861 and 1892. These two are generally considered important because they introduce a lot of minor tweaks. If we talk about 1861, it has to be portfolio system. It is 3 members in legislative council. In legislative council. Further, we have the concept of provincial legislative council and basically legislative decentralization. Legislative decentralization. And ordinance making powers under what is called as emergency provision. 1892 is known for two things. Simple. Nomination principle and expansion of councils. Anybody has any issue in these two? Because 1909 is a totally different cup of tea. Anybody has any issue here? I want everybody's consent here. Yes, sir, perfectly fine, no issues whatsoever. Non-official means Indian. Official means Britisher. Right? Okay, perfect. Very good. Now, Indian Council Act 1909. This act has a lot of content. Why? See, between 1892 to 1909, a lot of things have happened. First change is Swadeshi movement, moderates, now extremists. We have the what we call as division, the split also. That split. And we have rise of revolutionary activities also, which is which is Anushilan, Yugantar, Mitra Mela, Abhinav Bharat. Then this is, yes, partition of Bengal, as it is called, partition of Bengal, which will in turn lead to Swadeshi movement. At the same point of time, at the same point of time, we have AMT Jackson assassination. We have the Kingsford assassination attempt. Then this is the period in which we will have the, the Chapekar brothers. We will have multiple understand. Gadar movement is a little late. Delhi bombing is 1912. Gadar movement is again late, 13 to 15. 1909 comes in between as a way of pacification. But one thing was clear, that nationalism was becoming more and more pronounced. With nationalism becoming more and more pronounced, taking political nationalism also into context, which is we have political nationalism. At the same point of time, we have revolutionary activity also. We have political extremism, we have extremism generally. Therefore, things have changed quite a lot. And this is where Secretary of State Morley and Viceroy Minto, that is why it is called Morley Minto reforms, they will have to do something. But what is interesting is that 1906 is also the year of the formation of the Muslim League. And 35 members of the Muslim League, which is called as the Shimla Deputation, are going to meet the Viceroy Minto in 1906, which is going to be very, very important because a principle called separate electorates was proposed. Now, first we have to understand what is separate electorates. What is separate electorate? See, there is a concept called reserve seats. We have reserve seats in India today also. But reserve seats in a legislative assembly can have two types of electorals or electorates: joint or separate. Joint or separate. Joint means, for example, there is a certain constituency. In that constituency, you have Hindus, Muslim, Christian, and even Sikh. The total number of Hindus are 10,000, Muslim is 5,000, Christian is 5,000, Sikh is 5,000. This is the number of, you can say, population of them. So total 25,000 population is there. Now, if I reserve this seat for a Christian candidate, so then A, B, C, D, four people will basically become candidates. But what is common to A, B, C, D is all would be Christians. But when the voting will happen, the total number of votes is going to be 25,000. Meaning, though Christian members are there, joint electorate means that whatever A gets, B gets, C gets, D gets, everybody is voting for the candidates. This is called reserve seats joint electorate. This is called as reserve seats joint electorate. And this is not disenfranchising. This is not communal per se. This is to empower a certain group. Now, in the same case, I can have separate electorates also, wherein when I reserve this seat for a Christian candidate, only Christian members can vote, meaning total number of votes is 5,000. Then it is called separate electorate. Separate electorates is dangerous. Why? Because it's disenfranchising 20,000 people. It is taking away the right to vote. So India today follows reserved seats, joint electorates when it comes to SC/SC seats. Meaning the candidate will be SC and ST, but everybody in the constituency is going. This separate electorate concept is dangerous. Muslim members or the Simla deputation, as it is called, with the Muslim League, Curzon had taught the Muslim population of Eastern Bengal that it is in your interest to ask for separate electorates, divide and rule, and your interest is separate from the Hindu interest. This is called pure social engineering, where communalism is going to be born within India via the British. A natural antagonism was never there. It is cultivated by the British via these institutions and these concepts. And Morley Minto reform, Minto is considered to be the father of communal electorate because he will introduce separate electorates. For a very long time, there was a lot of debate. Should it be separate electorate? Should it be non-separate electorate or joint electorate? But through the Shimla deputation, and the British now started to fear Indian nationalism, so they needed to find a key. The first key to slow down Indian nationalism was communalism. That is separate electorate. So the most important provision which is introduced via the what is called as 1909 Act, or what is today called as Morley Minto reforms, is separate electorate. This concept has to be understood properly because UPSC can ask you a question where they can ask you to explain what is separate electorate. If you cannot explain what is separate electorates, then you will not be able to understand or even write down anything which is important. So, with regards to the structure, with regards to the structure, I hope separate electorates is clear to everyone. Come on, tell me this, then I'll move forward. There is one more. You have Bengal, Bihar, Bengal, Bihar. Bihar is going to be created. No, not right now. After 1911, you have Bengal, Bombay, Madras, the Oudh sector, Northwestern Frontier Province or Northwestern Province, and Punjab. This structure, repeat once again. See, simple concept. Separate electorate is based on the principle of the idea of how a seat is reserved. Reserved seat means that a certain candidate can be only fighting for that position. So, for example, in a constituency of Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Sikh, I say the seat is reserved for Christian. If it is reserved for Christian, all the candidates have to be Christian. If it is a joint electorate, then everybody is voting, just that the candidate is Christian. When it is separate electorate, it means that now only Christians can vote for Christians, which is I have separated the electorate and 20,000 people cannot vote now. Very simply, if I say that you have to, Naidu, if I have to elect a class representative from you, I can have an understanding that the electorate is, I will say that the seat is reserved for a woman, but everybody is going to vote. Then everybody is going to vote, woman or be it a male or a female candidate. However, if I will say that it is reserved seats women, joint electorate is not there, separate electorate is there, then only women of the class can vote for that candidate. Men will automatically be barred from voting, disenfranchised. Electorate where the identity, religion of the candidate. It could not be just religion, it could be anything. Decides the electoral role of the constituency. Yes, that is in a way. Simple. The exact definition is when the candidates, when a seat is reserved with separate electorates, the community for which the seat has been reserved can only vote for that candidate. No other community can. I hope, Naidu, it makes sense that what is separate electorate. Separate electorate basically means that only the candidate community can vote for them. So very simply, women can be voting for women only. That is separate electorate. Women candidate, both men and women are voting, joint electorate. So, with regards to overall structure, separate electorates was introduced. If women then vote, women can only vote. Yes. If it is a reserved seat for women and separate electorates, only women can. If it is joint electorate, both men and women can. But the candidate will remain women. So, separate electorates was introduced in all the PLCs and also in the Central Legislative Assembly, or that is called as Indian Legislative Assembly, Executive Council, Legislative Council. Here also separate electorates are introduced. Please pay attention because these provision, the acts after this are quite complex, which is this and thereafter the 1919 Act. Small changes will happen, but they will be very consequential in that regard. I'll do that, mate. We'll discuss that. Don't issue. Don't worry. Now, SOS plus 15, Governor General and Viceroy of India, separate electorates plus reservation. Reservation is a different concept altogether. That is positive discrimination. Now, there are subtle changes here also. The subtle changes are in these 15 members, two Indian members were added. Two Indian members were added. Further, further, we have one Indian added for the first time to the Executive Council. Anybody remembers the name of this person? Indian added to the first time, Executive Council. What is the name of the first Indian to be associated in the Viceroy's Executive Council? What Sanyal? Satendra Prasad Sinha. Sometimes also written as Satendra Prasanna Sinha. But Satendra Prasad Sinha is the first one who will get associated. And at the same point of time, at the same point of time, we will have the concept of separate electorates coming into these two bodies, and now they can ask questions or additional question, and the budget can be discussed can be discussed. So if you look at the provisions of the 1909 Act, Central Legislative Assembly 60 members, there's an expansion in that. 27 elected non-official. This you do not have to remember. Do not remember. The numbers don't really matter. Official majority was retained in Central Legislative Assembly. Provincial legislative councils, there is going to be unofficial majority, meaning official majority in Central Legislative Council, but in Provincial Legislative Council, non-official majority, meaning Indian members are now increasing vis-a-vis British members. Further, elected members were elected indirectly only. Local bodies were electing an electoral college, which then used to nominate members into that regard. Elective principle was recognized for non-official council members. Morley Minto reforms. There was some way in changing the way people were being nominated into these councils. The budget could have been discussed, but not having additional questions. Manjeet, additional questions could be asked. It expanded the deliberative powers. As I said, members were able to ask additional questions, move budget resolutions, and so on. Voting separate budget items were permitted, but the budget as a whole could not be voted on. This is the technical language which is written. Further, for the first time, an Indian got associated with the Executive Council, and the system of communal representation will come through, wherein separate electorates will be introduced for Muslims. So the first community to get separate electorates is Muslim community, wherein they were also given seats in excess of their population. Population principle was not used, and separate electorates was also done. Pure communal vibes are coming through, which makes Minto the father of communal electorate. And at the same point of time, two Indians were added to the Indian Council office in London. So let's do one thing, let's consolidate. 1909 Act. Now, please remember, these three acts are very critical, come in the examination from time to time, are very standard questions which come. So, 1909 Act, what are the major changes which came through? Separate electorates. Second, the concept of two Indians, into what we call as House, India House in London, one Indian in Executive Council, official majority in Central Legislative Council, non-official majority in Provincial Legislative Council, and the concept of budget questions increase in deliberative power. I hope that you realize all of this is an eyewash. All of this is an eyewash. They are just doing a drama. All of this is based on the concept of divide and rule. Separate electorates to Muslims and seats in excess of population. All of this is being done just as an eyewash. There's no real change which they bring. So 1909 is also done. Can I move to 1919? This is the most complex act of all of them. I want 150% concentration now because 1919 is the most complex act. Has a lot of very subtle provisions. If not understood properly, this act is what UPSC plays with also. 1919, can we discuss? Yes or no? Yes, sir. I want everybody's consent. Come on. Yes. Okay. Now, see, 1909, 1919. What has changed? 1915, Gandhi has come back. Champaran, Kheda, Ahmedabad has happened. Rowlett has happened. Jallianwala Bagh has happened. Jallianwala Bagh has happened. And now the British need to pacify. Official majority in CLC, non-official majority. Manjeet, it means that there are more Britishers in the Central Legislative Assembly than Indians. But there are more Indians in the Provincial Legislative Assembly than the Britishers. That is the idea. Khilafat is forward, 1920. Gandhi, Kheda, Ahmedabad, Champaran, Rowlett, Jallianwala Bagh has happened in between this period. And now there's a need to pacify. And that pacification is going to happen via Montague Chelmsford reforms or Government of India Act 1990. Montague being the Secretary of State, Chelmsford being the Viceroy. Now, please try to understand that when we talk about 1919 Act, pay attention please. When we talk about 1919, there are two types of changes. Which one are called structural changes and the other one are called legislative jurisdictional change. The structural changes are brought in so as to complement the legislative change. And therefore, they are very planned. They're planned very properly. They are planned very properly. They are planned very properly, wherein there is a lot of, you can say, coordination between these. Now, let's first discuss the structural change. Once we understand that, then I will explain to you what is legislative jurisdictional change. Secretary of State plus 15 members. They are there. This is called India House. But now a new body is created in London, which is called the High Commission of India, with the what is called as Indian High Commissioner. This is is a body which deals with foreign affairs. Foreign affairs means how they deal with princely states. How they deal with princely states. Thereafter, they both now control. This is the first major change. They both then control or they direct Governor General and Viceroy of India, and the Governor General and Viceroy of India will now get a very interesting change in his legislative council. He will now get what is called as bicameral legislation. Council of States, Central Legislative Assembly. This is called as bicameralism at center. This is called as bicameralism at center, which is two houses, physical houses. 60 members here, 145 here. So now there are two bodies like the Lok Sabha and the Raj Sabha today, there which are now going to deliberate. Further, this is the second major change. 3 members out of 6 members are going to be Indians. All this because Jallianwala Bagh had created a lot of opposition. The real picture of India was the real picture of the British was in front of everyone. So there's a lot of eye washing which is happening. So we have three major changes here which have come through. High Commissioner, 3 members of the 6 are Indian, bicameralism at the center. Thereafter, now there is going to be even more interesting change, wherein the number of provinces has again changed. You have Bombay, Madras, Bengal. Now, Awadh has been renamed as United Provinces, which is UP. There's a new, which has been new count, rather new body which has been created, which is called Central Provinces. This is called CP, which is modern day Madhya Pradesh. Then you have Bihar, which has been separated from Bengal. And you have Punjab and Northwestern Frontier or Northwestern Province. Northwestern Province. I'll write this on this side so that it does not go behind me. Northwestern Province. Now, there is one more interesting thing that now every governor they will get an executive council in addition to the provincial legislative council. In addition to the provincial legislative council. This is another major structural change, which is an executive council is added to every governor's office. So, when we talk about structural changes, High Commissioner, bicameralism, High Commissioner, High Commissioner, bicameralism, 3 out of 6, an executive council, 2 governors, 2 governors, 2 governors. Now you will say, sir, why? Why have the executive council being added to the governor? Everybody is following me till this point because it will become more complex from here. Do we understand this much? What is the structural changes? Structural changes would be High Commissioner, bicameralism, 3 members, Executive Council added to the governors. Very good. Everybody has to say yes, please, come on. If you don't understand, you have to tell me. Now, this change has been brought in. This change has been brought in because now, for the first time, legislative jurisdiction is introduced in the Indian subcontinent, which is two lists will be created: provincial and imperial. Provincial list, legislative list, or imperial list. This is law making subjects, meaning there will be now what is called union, state, and concurrent list. Same concept. This is the union list, which is imperial list. State list is nothing but provincial list. And the idea is that on the imperial list, Viceroy plus his Council of State and Central Legislative Assembly will take a decision. But the provincial list was further divided. And that is called the concept of Dyarchy. That is called the concept of Dyarchy. Provincial list was divided into two: reserved and transferred. What is this concept of reserved and transferred? On reserved subjects, which are important subjects, only the governor plus his executive council will take a decision. But on transferred subjects, which are non-important ones, there will be governor plus his provincial legislative council. Reason is Indian element is more here. This is purely British element. So when it comes to revenue, when it comes to finance, when it comes to police, when it comes to land, when it comes to irrigation, all of this is given to reserved subjects. Once education, women, agriculture, sanitation, this is given to transfer so that the Indians can play the game that they are actually doing something meaningful, but they really aren't. But they really aren't. So this is the concept of Dyarchy, the division of provincial list into two subjects, which is reserved subjects and transfer subjects. This is done purely to make sure there is an illusion of power, but the real power is concentrated still with the governor. Do we understand what is Dyarchy? Do we? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. Other than these provisions, other than this provision, there are other changes which are also brought in. Separate electorates is extended to Sikhs, Anglo Indians, Europeans. Further, there was a provision that a public service commission should be established. That will be established in 1926. That is the precursor of the UPSC. Legislative competence defined, not competence jurisdiction. Then 25% of the budget could be voted upon, or rather we'll say can be voted. 75% still cannot be voted. There is women got right to vote, but based on income provision. Based on income provision. Why this name legislative jurisdiction? Because law making jurisdiction has been established. That who can make laws on which area. So in the viceroy can make in certain areas, the governors can make in certain. This is again a process of legislative decentralization. That not everything can be done. How union and state cannot legislate on each other. Same way, there's a differentiation with regards to that. Looking at these provisions, these are the major provisions of the 1919 Act. I will repeat it for you out of the PPT. See, legislative jurisdictional differentiation into central and provincial subjects. Structural changes still remain centralized and unitary. Bicameralism at center, upper house council of state, lower house legislative assembly, 145 and 60 members respectively. Separate electors extended to Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, Indian Christians and Europeans. Further, legislators could ask questions and adjournment motions vote on 25% of the budget. Executive Council added to the governor's office. Further, Dyarchy at provincial level, reserved and transferred subjects. Transfer subjects administered by governor with the aid of ministers, here by councillors. Governor also got the right to veto bills and ordinance making. The same point of time, women were given the right to vote with income provision. 3 out of the 6 members were now Indian. New office created High Commissioner's Office. Public Service Commission should be created. And after 10 years, things should be checked. 10 years. Meaning in 1929, we will check if everything is fine or not. That gets preponed to 1927 in the form of Simon Commission. So please understand this point. Let me consolidate before I go to the biggest, the mini constitution of the Indian subcontinent. Can I consolidate? Please tell me, can we consolidate till this point from 961 to 1919? Because if we can, then now the discussion is not more than 15-20 minutes or maximum half an hour. Yes, sir? Okay. See, 1861, 1892, 1909, 1919. If I have to write keywords related to them, 1861 is going to be portfolio. It is going to be Provincial Legislative Council. It could be the 3 members added to the Legislative Council. Right? These would define for me the 3 most important changes which happened with regards to the understanding of 61. Then here I would say nomination and the concept of what is called as indirect election or indirect election. Other changes are happening, but for us, yes, you can add ordinance here also. Ordinance to GGI. 1909 is known for separate electorates and plus 2 members in London and 1 member in Executive Council. Expansion of Legislative Council is happening across the board. Across the board. Thereafter, 1919, we have lot of keywords. One is list, which is provincial and central. Then we have High Commissioner. Then we have the 3 out of 6. Then we have Council of State plus Central Legislative Assembly, which is the concept of bicameralism. Then it is, we have Executive Council. We have Executive Council at provincial level. Then we have Dyarchy. Then we have State Public Service Commission or Public Service Commission. We have Women Vote. And we have what is called as the concept of this is the reserved and transferred. And we have separate electorates to Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, to Indian Christians and Europeans. And we know that now UP, CP and Bihar exist along with others. So I hope till this point everybody is on the same page with me. Nothing out of the box has been done. I've just consolidated. This is a feature of my lectures. I keep on consolidating so that you are in the right space to answer any question and you understand the important points. I'll keep on doing it. But I hope that the first consolidation is fine. Second consolidation is also fine. See, there will always be minor points, but first remembering the major points. Important minor points as it is can do. Right? First, remember these points. 25%, 75% of the budget, this and that is also there. Right? Now, the most important, this motion will discuss this, right? The most important act which is considered to be the base on which the Indian constitution is based on is the Government of India Act 1930. Now, what has happened between 1919 to 1935 and 1935 Act is a product of that. In this period, we've had Khilafat, we've had Swarajist, no changers, Swarajists and no changers. We've had Chori Chora in between. Then we've had Simon Commission come. And then we have the First World War also start. And now the Great Depression is also going to come into context. So Indian cooperation is needed. That will be also accompanied by Irwin Declaration, Delhi Manifesto, and thereafter CDM, which is CDM Phase 1. We will have Roundtable Conference, CDM Phase 1 going on. 1935 Act is exactly the product of the NCM pressure, CDM pressure, but is the product of 3 roundtable conferences plus Simon Commission report, which is together called as the White Papers. White Papers. That is basically what is called as the 1935 Government of India. In between, yes, Pune Pact has also happened. Gandhi has gone into his Harijan campaign. The 1930 to 32 is first phase. Then 1932 to 34 is second phase of CDM. And CDM will be disbanded in 34 in that regard. Harijan campaigns, RTC, Minorities Pact has come through. Multiple other things have come through. At this very, very dynamic period is this. Now comes the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935. Very interesting, very important. That ways you have to understand. Can we discuss Government of India Act 1935? Last 15-20 minutes. Come on. Yes? Yes, sir. Okay. Lahore session, Purnasaj resolution, all of that. That is part of this Irwin Delhi Lahore session. Okay. Now, the first change which happens is Secretary of State had 15-member council. Right? This 15-member council is gone now. As it is after 1919 Act, it was said that the salaries of these men and women who are associated with the Secretary of State, their salary should not be paid out of Indian revenue. But this 15-member council is gone. The High Commissioner's Office, this is also gone. So now there's only Secretary of State with a very small council of 3 members, which he's going to use to govern India. Then you have Governor General and Viceroy. He will have his Executive Council, his Council of State, and Central Legislative Assembly. At the same point of time, now the total number of provinces are 11. 3 new provinces are created. You have Bombay, Bengal, Madras, Bihar, a new one called Assam, and United Provinces. Along with that, central provinces, Punjab exist. Now, formally, 3 new will be added. One is called Northwestern Frontier Province. The next is called as Odisha or Orissa. Orissa is taken out from Bihar. And the last but not the least is the Sindh sector called Sindh. 3 new provinces. Northwestern Frontier Province, Orissa and Sindh. Assam was added in between 1919 to 1935. Further, Burma will be removed from India. Burma removed from British India. Now it is British Burma. So Indian map has now shrunk. Further, there is going to be very interesting concept. Bombay, Bengal, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and UP. Six out of these are going to be bicameral, and these will be unicameral. What does that mean? Here there will be governor and he will have executive council, then two Vidhan Parishad and Vidhan Sabha, which is they will have provincial legislative assembly, provincial legislative council. And here it is going to be governor, executive council, and legislative council, provincial legislative council. So this is where the bicameral understanding is going to come. There will be Dyarchy is provincial Dyarchy will be abolished, meaning no Dyarchy nowhere. But Dyarchy was proposed at center, but but not implemented. Not implemented. There is now a new dynamism with regards to how things are. There will be central list, there will be provincial list. These two lists exist since 1919 only. But concurrent list will be created and residual powers will be given to the governor general and viceroy. Concurrent means both can act upon. Further, a federal court will be established so as to make sure that province versus province and province versus what is called as center versus center can be established, which is the precursor to what is called as the Supreme Court today. The exclusive jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which is to manage federal issues. Separate electorates will be extended to women, and despite the fact that the Indian National Congress and Dr. Ambedkar Gandhi had gone through the Pune Pact, depressed classes will be given separate electorates. Further, RBI will be established as a federal bank. The act was introduced in 1934 but will be established as a federal bank in 35. And the franchise will be extended, meaning now people will be able to vote, we will be able to vote further. And one last provision which was brought in, which was not implemented further, is called All India Federation. This was also not implemented. I'll tell you what does All India Federation mean. There was also a new body which was proposed, which is called as the Central Railway Authority or Federal Railway Authority, which was produced. A lot of provisions that way. Now, what is this concept of All India Federation? The concept of All India Federation is very simple and straightforward. See, 11 provinces come under the viceroy. There are also what is called as chief commissioners areas. They also come under viceroy. They all are subject to the Government of India Act 1919, 1935. But close to one third of India was princely states. They lie under directly the British Crown, under the concept of paramountcy. What the All India Federation proposed was that these princely states should also be subject to Government of India Act and should go under the authority of the viceroy. Obviously, something like that was never going to happen because the princely states would not allow. But if you actually mark all these provinces together, you will see this modern map of India emerging. For example, if I add Sindh, Punjab, Northwestern Frontier Province, then I have United Provinces, Bihar, Bengal, Assam, then Odisha, then I have Central Provinces, Bombay, Madras. If you actually look at it, it looks like the modern day map of India. And at the same point of time, these areas were also marked with small areas which were chief commissioners area. Chief commissioners area. But what you see as empty space, this space, this space, this space are princely states. Jammu and Kashmir, you have Hyderabad, very big states. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to bring all of them together under All India Federation, which never came into existence. So therefore, the provisions of the Government of India Act 1935 are considered to be the most important till today because it shaped everything. So let's understand provincial autonomy means that the executive council of the viceroy cannot direct anything to the governors. Provincial autonomy. Hierarchy is also removed. End of hierarchy at provinces, proposed at central level, never implemented. Residual powers with the viceroy. Abolition of the India Council of Secretary of State. All India Federation never came into. Franchisee increased. Now 35 million people, 3.5 crore people could vote. Setting up of a federal bank, which is RBI, 1935. Federal Court was set up in 1937, which was later called the Supreme Court as we know it. Burma was separated. Orissa was removed from Bihar with Cuttack as capital. Sindh was separated from Bombay with Karachi as capital. Northwestern Frontier Province was given full status. Odisha and Sindh become the new provinces along with Northwestern Frontier Province. Bicameralism at provincial level. Madras, Bombay, Bengal, Bihar, Assam, United Provinces bicameral, other are unicameral. The the bicameral central legislature will have consist of Federal Assembly and Council of State. Threefold division: federal, provincial, concurrent. Act vested control of railways to the Federal Railway Authority. Separate electorates for depressed classes and women, along with labor. This is the mini constitution, the most important constitution, which in turn will be inherited by us. Now, anybody has any issue in these provisions, because then I will close this session by just having a basic discussion of Indian Independence Act 1947, through which we will get. What was All India Federation? What was All India? The All India Federation would have meant 11 provinces was Chief Commissioner area plus princely state together. But that never came into being. Everyone, come on. Are we clear? Yes, sir. Perfectly fine. Okay. So, in our last moment of consolidation, we had discussed this 1919. If I add 1935, All India Federation never came into being. Hierarchy at center never came into being. Hierarchy abolished at provincial level. This is correct. Then we have 11 provinces, 3 new, 6 are bicameral, 5 are unicameral. Federal Railway Authority, Federal Court, RBI, women and depressed classes along with labor getting separate electorates. Then we have Burma being removed, concurrent list, residual power with the viceroy. Along with that, the concept of what is called as further franchisee is basically the most important provisions of 1935. 1919 is more complicated than 1935. Remember this point. And the last is through which we got Indian independence, which is called the Indian Independence Act 1947, July 18th. The context being the whole process of what happened from Quit India to August offer to cabinet mission to RIN to INA to Mountbatten coming to ISMA plan. So the last set of provisions said that this act will be implemented on August 15, 1947. Two independent dominions will be created, India and Pakistan. Each dominion will have a governor general, and we chose Mountbatten as the governor general. Jinnah became the first governor general of Pakistan. Constituent Assembly will be formed to write the constitutions. At the same point of time, the government of India Act will be enforced till the constitution is written, and M.A. Jinnah will become governor general of Pakistan. We will have Mountbatten because who will deal with Jinnah in that regard? Therefore, we had Mountbatten only. The, the act in turn was very hastily applied with no plebiscite and no proper understanding, and the Radcliffe line forever divided India and Pakistan in a haphazard manner, which in turn led to a communal holocaust. So, on this note, we finish the 14 acts which we had to cover. We have covered from Regulating Act 1773 to Understanding 1781, 1784 to 1793 to 1700 and 1813 to 1833 to 1853 to 1858 to 1861, 92, 1892 to 1909 to 1919 to 1935. We had set out to do this when we started around 6 o'clock. I hope that these 14 acts are totally clear, and in the past 3 hours, we've been able to create a good understanding in our mind. I have given you three proper consolidation. You can take screenshots of that. The PPT of this session will be uploaded into my Telegram channel, but that will take time because it will be a very heavy file. The point is that you have to understand the provisions, the reasons, then only you can understand the acts, which in turn will lead to a mains level understanding along with prelims level statement based questions. So I hope that this session has been fruitful. Thank you and take care. I will see you very soon under different provisions of what we do for prelims. Conquer prelims. We'll discuss that and we will launch that very soon. Thank you. Take care.